What is going on, everybody? This is Brandon.
Stefan.
And Chet.
Welcome back to Comic Scenes. Welcome back to Crisis on Infinite Rants. This is a show where we talk about a comic book theme or topic. Today, we are going over our top 5 favorite X-Men artists with you guys with 2 honorable mentions. I do want to point out today is Wednesday when you're seeing this, so happy new comic book day. That means it's also the best day in the world, which is Whiplash Wednesday as well. With the PCP Army Bad Batch, we started at 11 o'clock with Nick Comic Culture. Hopefully, Toys Cadets got their books in, got their diamond shipment, so we can go ahead and take a look at that. If that is out, I highly recommend you guys kick your day off starting with that show. Then come over to here at the 1 o'clock slot. After this show, we're going over to TM Nerdy, who's going to be talking with my Daredevil brethren, Bullseye Bob, Station Travis. That's going to be a fantastic show. And then we have Big Herm. I'm actually going to be on Big Herm's haul video today. Later today. I believe that's going to be at 6 o'clock or 7. But, you know, I'm really excited. I've never been on Herm's show, so I'm looking forward to talking it up with Herm. And then we have later tonight, the What Are You Reading show, which I believe I will be co-hosting. I'm co-hosting it. And we're just going to be talking about the books that we've read in the past November, books that we're thankful for, stories that mean a lot to us. So make sure you check that out over on Tomorrow Cinema's channel at 9 p.m. Eastern time, 8 p.m. Central. Guys, I'm so happy to be here. The X-Men is such a great property. And Chet, I do want to thank you for joining us. Chet, just a little intro to about Chet was one of the first people I met in the comic book community, one of my very first friends, and we're brothers. As they say, and remember the Titans, don't you see the family resemblance? Chet, for everyone who doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself, my man.
I'm a longtime comic collector. I delve into anything Marvel, DC. After meeting some of you guys in the community, I've branched off a little bit into some of the indie books and haven't really gotten a good chance to read them. But obviously, I use you guys as more or less my news source for that stuff. At some point, I'll get to them, but you guys are the ones who are reading it for me at the moment. But I'm a big X-Men fan, in case you didn't know. I guess if you've seen my page, you have an idea. Yes. But I'm rooted in comics to the X-Men more than anything else. So that's basically who I am. Like I said, though, I'm well-rounded for the most part. I got a lot of first appearances of other characters outside of the X-Men. So I just like the entire comic game.
100%, man. I'm really grateful that you're taking the time out of your busy day. I know your Redskins just had a great game. So, or your Washington, your Redskins. I know they just had a big game. Stefan, as always, man, how you doing?
Hey, we're talking X-Men. It's Wednesday. You know, I'm excited. It's Christmas Day every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday. It's a trip to the Christmas tree, the local comic book store. But anyway, you guys, let's get this show on the road with our honorable mention. We get 2 honorable mentions. I'm going to kick it off with my first one. So I do want to point out any disclaimers. By the way, if you are catching this at 1 o'clock Eastern or later on, make sure you guys share your list with us in the comments below. I want to know who your favorite X-Men artists and other artists that you have enjoyed. There are so many different X-Men artists out there. They've been a franchise for the better part of how long now? How long?
52 years. More than that, actually. It's more
than that because it's 63.
Yeah, so it's more like
60 years. Going on 60 years now.
Yeah,
something like that. If we're rounding up in that situation. So obviously there have been so many artists, and it's very difficult to limit it down to just 7 names on a piece of paper. So if you guys have a different list, that's okay. Right at the end of the day, we all love X-Men. If my favorite artist is not on your list, I'm bad at you. Your favorite artist is not on my list. That's okay. My honorable mention. Reason why I'm doing these is because it's Jack Kirby. I know a lot of people are going to be riled up in the comments over that. Great. But Jack Kirby, as iconic as he was, co-creating the X-Men with Stan Lee, his art it's baseline. It's great. Don't get me wrong. I love looking at it. I love going back to all the older X-Men issues and looking at all of his covers. But when I look at what Jack Kirby really had his legacy on, I have to say that's 100% Fantastic Four. I've enjoyed his artwork much better in that book than I did in X-Men. Because X-Men was really just the base level, and just other people have elevated it over the course of the time. So he is going to be my first honorable mention. Steph, what about you, man?
I'm going to go with Marc Silvestri. I just, no particular issue. I just a comic to represent their art. But it was, I really liked this, him and the Wizard, like followed by Whilce Portacio was after. Yeah, their style definitely was edging the X-Men, or giving them like a very sleek, sophisticated, action-packed style, like modernized at the time. And I really love how Silvestri designs his characters. I don't know so I'm gonna go with Silvestri.
100%.
I'll find some better way to articulate it a little bit later towards the end, but
Silvestri's definitely on my list. He's a little bit higher on it. Chet, what about you, man? What about your first honorable mention?
Well, only reason he's not in my top 5 is because he hasn't been around very long. I think you already know who he is, Brandon. Pepe Larraz.
Ah.
All right, so obviously we were thrown into the Hickman world a couple of years ago. I didn't know who the artist was, but after reading it, I needed to know because, his art combines like the cartoon feel, like the fantasy feel, and it's just not normal everyday comic book art. It's very fluid. I just like the way his characters are put together. They have a lot of the old quality, but the new quality is like right on top of it. So it's easy to, I guess, translate from one to
right. Pepe is definitely up there. Not on my list, but he's definitely, I would put him in top 10. I do want to see what his art looks like down the road, because he is coming back to the book. He has been drawing X-Men for the better part of 3 years now. So I'm excited to see where he goes. That's an excellent pick. I think Pepe Larraz has a bright future in comic books. Such young. He did Extermination, which the art was great. Just the event just wasn't all that. But
there was good work.
Yeah, it was great work. That was my first introduction to him. And then going into Hickman, him and RB Silva had a great pairing. My next honorable mention, he's been on the show when we were doing content over on Instagram. He's a good friend. We speak pretty regularly, but he is going in the honorable mention. And he was actually the first X-Men artist I really, really got involved with, because that was the first X-Men artist I ever came across. And that was Lionel Francis Yu. I loved his dynamic, and I love how different his style is. At the time when I first read it, he almost reminded me of a Chris Bachalo. But it was just a little bit more sophisticated. He has developed his styles throughout the years. He started drawing just Wolverine and Deadpool, and look at him now, leading us into the Hickman era, as well as doing work on like X-Men Revolution and Uncanny X-Men down in the early 2000s. Lionel has really just worked with a lot of great people, and I think that his art in X-Men in particular has showed the most growth over the years, and for that reason, I'm putting him at my second honorable mention. Back over to you, Steph.
Good choice. Love Lionel. I'm gonna go with JR. I really enjoy. Well, maybe it's my bias because I just really enjoyed his art at this point in time in his career. Between this and Daredevil, I just think he had really kind of. It's always had that the very geometrical feel to it, but it just had a lot of detail at the time. And X-Men, it needs that. It's got such a great cast of characters. You need to be able to differentiate them, and he was, he's got his signature look, but he still was able to add so many distinct details for each member. Like I love how he draws Iceman in the hulked out snow form, ice form.
Right.
But, I'm gonna have to go with him for honorable mention number 2. All great artists we've been mentioned. We've been listening. This has been hard, very difficult.
If there's an X-Men Hall of Fame, these guys would be up there, 100%.
Yeah.
This is an impossible list to make. That is a great choice. JR is off that list of mine for the sole reason, again, is that I've enjoyed his work on other projects more so than I've enjoyed his work on X-Men. That doesn't take away from his ability on X-Men at all whatsoever, but I think there are much better artists that have captured my eye. Chet, who is your last honorable mention before we dive into these top 5?
Okay, so my second honorable mention is a little bit of a flip-flop, but I'm going to go with, because of what I saw in Ultimate X-Men, I'm going to go with Adam Cougar. Okay.
Kubert.
if you read Ultimate X-Men, you saw that art. It was very definitive. It was like the backgrounds, everything was perspective perfect, and the characters, they were drawn differently enough to give you a feel that you were in a different dimension. It felt so good and so different. So for that type of stamp on the product, I got to give him at least an honorable mention, because obviously if he did it in the actual pages of the 616, I might have him in my top 5.
Yo, speaking of, let me
he's gonna whip it. This is like Steph's signature move, you guys. If you're new to the channel, Stefan has every book in hand, and that he does with the Kubert variant.
What
number is that? I have that book.
378.
Yeah, okay.
He did like 360.
Yeah,
Gambit was returning, and
he was known for his Gambit redesign of the costume.
Gambit,
Yep.
Absolutely. But that's my number 2 to close out that topic.
Great stuff, guys. Let's get into our top 5. Chet, I'm gonna let you kick us off with this one, though. We're gonna work the other way around the clock.
All right. So then, if that's the case, it might be painful for some, but I'm gonna go with Jack Kirby as my number 5. One, he's obviously the forefather of a lot of things. I mean, I'd say the X-Men as one of his early works it was good, obviously it was good enough for the time. But I think his better works came in some of the DC books at that time. Like was it New Gods?
The New Gods.
Yeah, and I mean, there was so many intricacies more than in the X-Men books when you read the New Gods. But obviously, he's still the guy who put the X-Men on paper first. Although his art isn't as up to date as what seems to be a technological age for art, he still stands out because he was one of the first. 100%. So I'm giving him the 5th spot. I mean, 1, because he's a forefather, and 2, because his art didn't go as far as some of the others I have on my list. But he's still got the legendary status over all of them.
Right. I think the hardest part is picking, who's been here longer versus who really captured my eye. Because you can capture my eye for 2 issues, but if you can't do that consistently, over like a span of time, I'm like, it's harder for me to say X-Men was really definitive towards that person. Jack Kirby, obviously being the father, but later on, like, there are so many artists out there. Neil Adams, for example, who had a great impact on X-Men in 8 issues, but because it was just 8 issues, he's not on my list. Same with Barry Windsor Smith, was on a very, very short-lived artist, but very talented at the same time. Stefan, who's your number 5?
I'm going to have to go with John Cassidy.
Oh, that's a curveball right there.
Astonishing X-Men. This was just very definitive for me. Like, this came off the run of the tail end of Grant Morrison's New X-Men, and the whole arc was kind of like about modernizing the X-Men for today's times. And then Joss Whedon and John Cassidy came in, and they made the X-Men superheroes again, put them back in costumes, but they were still modernized. So it was like a sequel to the New X-Men, but it's in the superhero trope aspect. He's a very iconic artist to begin with. I loved him in Planetary, but just to see him come on and do X-Men, like his coloring and shadowing, like, just, look at Cyclops. I know you don't like Cyclops, Brandon, but it's a wonderful Cyclops.
I see Cyclops. I'm more drawn to that Colossus, but
I see your influence, Brandon, is rubbing off elsewhere.
I enjoy Cyclops. I enjoy this. I enjoy Havoc much more, but
Stefan, I love how you go the extra mile and bring out covers for this, because I didn't do that. But you're the man. You're the man. That's why we keep you around.
To give people like a visual reference if they've never seen it.
Yeah, I got you. I'm with it. As you guys saw earlier, my man Steph brought out a cover of this person. He's my number 5, Marc Silvestri. I loved his tight line work. The way that he was able to design costumes is unlike anyone else. I feel like he's a very early Greg Capullo. I feel like Greg Capullo took a lot of inspiration from Marc Silvestri, and the way that just he drew with so much energy. It was like everything was rock and roll, high energy, nice and tight, but also really depending on a lot of negative space as well, which gave room for his inkers, his colorists, to really do their part as well. He wasn't like who's an artist that really just does everything themselves. I would even go as far to say Jim Lee, who's like really tight. It's like Scott Williams when he was like inking him, it really wasn't as much as, let's say, Bob Mccloud with early Todd McFarlane, or Terry Austin with John Byrne. I would say Chris Pachalo is probably the best example of an artist that needs an inker that will work in those like tight, that doesn't really give their inker a nice time. But Silvestri does. He's very complimentary to his inkers and his colorists, gives them a lot of room to work. I think him drawing Sinister and introducing Sinister with Claremont has to be the highlight of mine for his art. But everything, and then Messiah Complex, that one issue Messiah Complex he did returning, it was like, this guy can still draw. A lot of times we see veterans in the industry come back and they can't draw as well. And a lot of times I've noticed their artwork is actually simplified, and we get more spread pages, splash pages. We get more traditional panels, like your 6-panel grids, your 9-panel grids. But Silvestri was actually drawing in that issue, like really, really complex panel layouts. So, I mean, it's a Messiah Complex, I get it. But I thought that was amazing just to see that alone. I was like, and that the fact that he has a long-lasting impact on the X-Men just makes it even more special to me. So he's definitely solidifying my number 5 spot. So we're moving on to number 4. Chet, let's kick it off.
All right. Number 4, you just mentioned him. He only had a short run, but it was pretty definitive based on the way he drew the characters. They were bold. They were forthright. They looked more realistic than what we had previously in other X-Men books. So my number 4 is going to be Neil Adams. And not just for X-Men work, but pretty much everywhere else he's been. You know, and obviously I'll gravitate to X-Men first before everything, but you can't discredit the guy. He's a hell of an artist, and although he talks a whole lot, he can draw.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Oh, 100%. I think the best thing about Neil Adams is the angles that he brought to the comic industry, and he was just able to.
His shading was incredible in certain books.
Shading was great, you know, and just the way. And I think if anyone else was going to introduce the Savage Land, I think Neil Adams was really. Or no, he didn't introduce the Savage Land, but he really expanded it.
He expanded it
with Sarin, but the Savage Land was always there with Kazar. But
he created the Animen in the Savage Land.
Yeah, so I think his work there, just giving it that beautiful layout, was honestly great. Obviously with Havoc, ex-husband to my wife Polaris. Stefan, what's your number 4? Well, we moved past that. Hilarious, not funny joke.
I'm gonna have to go with Brett Anderson. Maybe just for this issue alone, because it had such an effect on me. I just really enjoyed how he drew the X-Men's expressions, the details. Look at that hand, and he's got this is not this particular issue. There's a few more, but just this one. Well, yes, this one in particular.
I can tell you stuff. I enjoy his Nightcrawler, especially in that book.
Yes. He's got a way of Nightcrawler always, to me, when he was first introduced, was supposed to come off as scary, but he's the nicest dude you've ever met. But he comes off as creepy as hell looking, and he exemplified that with his Nightcrawler perfectly.
100%. I think he took a lot of inspiration from Cockrum. Also, God Love Man Kills, one of the best kind of mini stories in X-Men history. I think God Love Man Kills is probably one of the better standalone stories, next to Marvel Graphic Novel 4. I have a really nice spot in my heart for that story. I'm sorry, but I do. My number 4, I'm going with, he's a very good friend of mine, but that's not me being biased at all, because he's a great artist. I'm talking about none other than Whilce Portacio. Creator of Bishop, not co-creator. He is the creator of Bishop. what I loved about Whilce is just like every character, every design was like unique to his, even though like he was drawing with some of the biggest people in the game. Scotty Williams, Jim Lee, the Simonsons were there at the time. Bob Layton was in the X office. So you had a lot of heads, you had a lot of great creatives all coming together, like your hottest team. And Whilce was very new. You know, him and Jim were coming off Punisher at the time, and they completely just took this book by storm. Whilce was just gorgeous. Like, I think Fluently was much better than Jim Lee. Yeah. I would say, because I'm actually going to kick off 3 because they go hand in hand. Jim Lee's number 3. I think the biggest difference is Jim Lee was a much better pinup artist, and when you needed like that big bombastic event, I just think Jim Lee had more of a body of work in the game than Whilce. But Whilce's contributions are not to be unmentioned, creating some of the better characters in the Marvel universe, in the X-Men universe rather, and just really bringing that energy and that compliment to Jim Lee that is so often overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
There is no Image Comics without Whilce Portacio. There is no Bishop without Whilce Portacio, which means there is no 2 seasons of the X-Men animated show. So Jim Lee being my number 3, like I said, he's a great pinup artist, great bombastic, and he came in with new costume design, so that was obviously very iconic. I think his attention to detail was something that drew me to him in the first place. My first introduction to Jim Lee was actually in Batman Hush. So going back and seeing his X-Men, I found that to be much more compelling than his work in Batman. But again, they're 2 different dynamics because the X-Men are very character heavy. Batman is very setting heavy. I get it. But Hush also had so many characters. But I really do like Jim Lee and what he brought to the game. There was no one hotter than Jim at the time, you know. No. And then relaunching the X-Men title with Chris Claremont, drawing Magneto. I don't think I've seen a better angle with Asteroid M than just Magneto just towering over. You really felt the size of him. He felt like Galactus. Like I felt like Galactus was there, but it was Magneto. So I liked it a lot. Let's do it this way. Steph, who's your number 3?
So you just kind of skipped us with number 4. You went from your number 4 to your number 3. So we'll do double up, I guess.
No, you guys already did your number 4.
No, we didn't.
Yeah, I think we did, didn't we? What was my last one?
Your last one was because I went last. Remember, because you did Brett Anderson at number 4. You did.
No, I did. We did the 2 honorable mentions, and then Brett Anderson.
All right, so go. Give 2.
So number 4, I'm gonna go with Joe Madara. The 90s was a very different time for comics and mediums to begin with. Anime, manga was on the rise, and he was a very perfect hybrid artist of 90s comic book art or American comic book art and manga at the same time. And I really think that helped. The X-Men were always kind of distinct, but that kind of gave them their flavor in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, and made them like a distinct title and stand out for that era. His action, I love how he draws Gambit, just like the eyes. He's very, I would say influenced by JR a little bit, to be honest, but very distinct on his own and definitely helped define the X-Men in the 90s after Lee left.
Is he the one who started the Phalanx Covenant?
Yes.
Yeah, so then, yeah.
I've read that.
He's real deal, man. Like that art is like, it's cartoony but abstract, and it works. Very technological.
I would say based off that book, it's almost a combo of JR, and Byrne.
I would think more a combo of Byrne and Kirby. I'm weird. I don't know.
I could see that. I could see why you said that.
Chet, you got. Oh, Stefan, sorry, my apologies.
Sorry.
Stefan has another one.
I'm gonna go with Frank Quitely. These last 3 were really hard. I almost wanted to save him for my number 1, but the other 2 edged it out. New X-Men, one of my favorite runs, Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, amongst other artists, but this was the signature team. Just really, like I was saying earlier, modernized the X-Men for the millennium. Like, you know, they made them a team for the times.
Yeah, I still gotta read that.
It's worth it, man. Grant Morrison is known for their wacky ideas and just out there abstract things. And I don't think any other artist really helps complement or bring their stories to life like Frank Quitely does with Grant Morrison.
I can say in regard to Quigley, his art reminds me. There's a movie. It was the first animated movie ever to be shown in a movie theater. Do you know the name of that movie?
Mary Poppins.
The cat?
No, it was called Heavy Metal.
Oh, I've
His
seen it.
art is very similar to the art from that flick. It's bubbly, it's big, it's. If you see that movie, I'll bring it with me next time I see you, Brandon. And I'll get you a stuff. It's great. I mean, it's like visually, his art is somewhat. It straight up reminds me of that type of pencil.
Chet, you're on number 3, right?
Yeah.
You said Neil Adams.
Number 4 was Neil Adams for me.
So you're on number 3.
Okay, so number 3 kind of threw me into a little bit of a quandary, but I'm gonna say Bob Mccloud.
Bob is awesome. Bob's a great friend. I love him to death. I love Bob.
Great guy, really cool. He's got a couple of pictures in my sketchbook. I just like his art. I mean, it's spanned over a course of time. The X-Men stuff he did in the 90s in terms of the numbers in the 90s from like 94 to what was it, like 99 almost, I believe. Or in that realm. His overall body of work is good. Not just X-Men. It spans through New Mutants and everything, but I like the way he evolved them from what we saw from the Kirby side, I guess.
Very Neil Adams, I would say, in the fact of how much more alive his art felt.
Yeah.
He was a very accomplished inker as well. He inked Todd McFarlane when he came into the game.
Oh wow.
But if you guys want more information on that, check out the interview that I had with Bob Mccloud. That was fantastic. But New Mutants, that is one of my favorite books. I love his work in that.
You could see the evolution of his art from like the X-Men, and then when he started New Mutants, you could see how much tighter it got.
And then when he came back to that show or to that book.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So he's had a couple of runs. So yeah, he's a great artist.
Absolutely. Great pick.
Yep. Thank you.
Bob Mccloud's fantastic. So I guess we're on number 2. Yep. I'm actually here comes all the dislikes, but John Byrne. John Byrne is my number 2. The reason why Byrne kind of he's very cartoony, right? So Byrne's cartoony. I love the way that he drew different characters. I love the way that he was able to master space, especially in issue 124 when they were getting out of Arcade World. And he drew, and that was 124 because 123 was where they got there. 124 is how they escaped, and him drawing Nightcrawler in like the game control area, which is fantastic. That scene sticks out to me in my head. Obviously, X-Men 112, my favorite X-Men book of all time. High five. Okay. So yeah, but the only thing really holding Byrne back is he really changed the focus of some of the characters in there. So like if you look at Colossus, who was supposed to be like the primetime big guy, right? Look at what you're coming into. And then Nightcrawler, obviously, trying to stand out with his colors and his composition, bringing in that sort of audience. If you look at what was popular at Marvel at the time, it was The Thing, and I don't think that John Byrne really gave Colossus the time spread that he needed. I think John Byrne was very narrow focused on specific characters and didn't give a lot of characters room to breathe. I think that's really the biggest flaw in his work. He's a fantastic artist, one of my favorite of all time, but I do have to point out the flaws for him being at the number 2 spot. And that's simply because the artist at number 1 really included everyone and gave them each attention. And then Byrne, obviously, Byrne was fantastic, but he is the number 2 spot. Stefan, yours.
My number 2 is actually I wonder if it's your number 1, but Dave Cockrum. This was a hard one. Like I said, the last 3 were really hard for me. He's very key artist for the X-Men. Like I love the way he draws the expressions.
Yeah.
For characters' faces, like eyes and stuff like that. When I think of like classic X-Men, I think of like the space opera type of stuff like that. You know, like Shi'ar, Kalandra Brood,
Starjammers.
Starjammers, yes, Corsair and the Starjammers.
Oh, the way he drew Corsair is fantastic.
Yeah, he
I
was
thought the
big.
way he drew like any one of the Starjammers was awesome.
Chad, yeah,
Chad,
Raza, yep.
It's
Okay,
like
so it's Chad, right? It's
Raza.
Chad.
Would you have been saying?
I've been saying COD.
Okay, oh, that works.
I know
And
some
I've been
people say
saying
Chode.
Yeah, I knew Brandon was
long before you guys were born.
God, I like that. But him and my number one artist were kind of like the artists that kind of encompass that space opera, just grand X-Men tales that I think of when I think of classic X-Men.
Oh,
So
100%.
Solid number 2. Love Dave.
Solid number 2. Solid.
Best form right here, binary.
Yes.
Let it be known.
Let it be known. Preach it. Steph, Chet, what's your number 2?
All right, my number 2 is probably pretty easy for you guys to figure out. Who's my number 2?
It's not John. It's Jim Lee.
All right, so Brandon, ding, 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 ding. All right, so that's how I guess I'm transparent because you probably already know who my number 1 is. But
I've seen your
Jim
signature
Lee.
collection, and one of them is not on there, or will ever be.
You just activated my anxiety. Thanks. So my number 2 is a fantastic artist. He's got the resume from like heaven because he's been on everything DC, Image, Marvel. Got the number 1 selling book of all time in that X-Men number 1. So we already know I'm talking about Jim Lee. I mean, he changed the game back in '91 when he came out with that X-Men book. His art was legendary. It still is. I mean, you can't honestly say there's something he's done that you can just point at and say it's whack or it's just not good.
Right.
It's good. It's like, that's like stuff you don't see. You know what I mean? So that for the uniqueness of his art at the time, that pretty much, I'm pretty sure that's the reason why those X-Men books remain the number 1 selling book of all time.
Definitely.
God, 100%. I couldn't agree more with that, other than the fact that he is my number 3. Let's go into our number 1. Stefan, who's your number 1?
My number 1, John Byrne. I just think he really, like I said, him and Cockrum kind of encompass that whole. There are a lot of the space odysseys and the epic adventures the X-Men are known for happened with these 2 artists for me, like very signature defining moments in the X-Men mythos. Once again, I think he's great at expressions too. Cockrum maybe a little bit better, but I think like he got like the scale of what Claremont was going for with his stories and his backgrounds. I think he does great backgrounds, to be honest, especially for an artist at the times. Like,
oh yeah, that's probably his biggest strength.
Yeah, his background is solid, man.
That adds up, like backgrounds, like subtleties, stuff like that. It really enhances a story sometimes. So yeah, I'm John Byrne. This was not an easy list. It was fun though. But John Byrne took the cake.
And Chet,
I may as well just jump in Stefan's seat. I mean, it's like obviously you know my number 1 is John Byrne. He's the one that I mean, when I discovered the X-Men, I don't know if you guys know this, but 110 was my first, and that wasn't a John Byrne. That was a Kubert book, I think. I'm not, or the cover was Kubert. I'm not sure who did.
Kubert wasn't drawn at that time.
Well, who was on the cover of that book? I forget. X-Men 110. It wasn't John Byrne.
That was
Perez. It was literally a filler issue, and that's the reason I don't know it, because there's a name on there I don't care to remember.
Yeah, I don't think it was a signature artist, to be honest.
I don't think so either. But if you get to it, it was X-Men 110.
It was art by Tony DeZungia.
That's what I mean. See, it's a name none of us really you know. But it was a filler. I didn't get my first blast of John Byrne until X-Men 111. And you've seen the art in that book. I mean, like the faces, the expressions, the anger.
Oh, he got it. Oh my gosh, Stefan. This guy.
I'm gonna share one day. I'll post my copy for you, Steph.
Thank you. I look forward to it. The signs.
No, it's okay. It's a cute book.
It's only a 9.8 with a bunch of SIGs. I know the
No, it's only got one SIG.
Oh, and it's a 9.6 or 9.8.
It's a 9.8. It's got the SIG.
Stan.
That's all you need. That's all.
But yeah, John Byrne, he opened the doorway to art for me, you know, back then, because I was actually collecting Marvel Team Up before I collected the X-Men. And I didn't realize it, but John Byrne was doing that at the time. Yeah. So I guess I had a little
Captain Britain ones.
What's that?
I did the Captain Britain ones with
yeah.
Because that ran cohesively with Iron Fist and X-Men.
Yes.
And Arcade.
What issue number was it?
Oh my gosh, it was I know this. It was 63 and 64.
Hold on, which one was the 63?
Huh?
No, you're wrong.
What number?
It is
I have the book. I just
okay. But you're talking which hold on, which
Marvel Team Up first Captain Britain in a US comic book.
That was number 65 and 66.
I was close. I was like 2 off. I'll take that as a big old.
Yeah, we'll get that.
63 was, I think, Daughters of the Dragon.
And
64.
So, it was.
Let me turn this off for you. I'm sorry. But yeah, that's my number one.
There's your number one. And my number one is Dave Cockrum. What I loved about Dave Cockrum was just the attention to detail that he had, drawing these characters, giving them amazing costumes, building these amazing stories with Len Wein in Giant Size X-Men, and then later on with Claremont throughout 94 through 107, because Byrne came 108. And I really love just the dynamic and the attention to detail that he drew in. X-Men 101 is probably my favorite book of his. And then 102, following up with a lot of those action shots between Colossus and Juggernaut. I think that was really one of my favorite battles, because that was like one of the battles that really involved all the X-Men characters at the time. I loved the way that he drew Cyclops' visor.
Yes.
Better than anyone else in the game, and that's what drew me to him first, was how well he was able to visually draw me to my least favorite character. So that gives me mad props. I give mad props for that.
You always knew it was him with those 2 red, like the bulbs inside of
something. Yeah, it was really interesting just to see his dynamic, and later on returning to the book. I don't think Dave Cockrum gets nearly enough credit as he deserves. I think if he did the same issues that Byrne did, maybe he wouldn't be fit, but I think he's still right up there. Composition wise, I think Byrne has the better backgrounds, but when you're looking at how to draw certain characters, how to capture a lot of emotion, I think Cockrum is really the way to go. And that's, again, we were talking about something like so niche, like something on the background. I think Cockrum did more of that in the foreground, maybe just like drawing like a different, like kind of a smirk in the nose, like a gasp, you know? And that's a straight Kirby influence as well. So I give Dave Cockrum a lot of props. So that's my number one. And again, there are a lot of artists that we left off. Like we left off George Perez, who was very short-lived, but a great artist. But again, we want to know who your top 5 is. If you have one, what are your 2 honorable mentions? What is your favorite X-Men artist? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you guys subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. If you made it this far, I guarantee you're automatically pressing that like button. I don't need to remind you. But as always, this show will drop at 1 o'clock Eastern time, so always stay tuned for that. Chet, thank you so much for joining us tonight, brother.
No problem, Brandon. It's always a pleasure, brother.
Stefan, as always, couldn't ask for a better co-host.
Thank you. You know I love you.
Really appreciate all the support, guys. Upcoming news on the channel. This is Wednesday, so on Saturday, you guys are going to be seeing Sit Down with J.M. DeMatteis talking about Ben Reilly's Spider-Man, which I'm really excited for. I've seen some of the insides of it. It's great. I'm really looking forward to launching that promotion with him. That book will be out in January. I've been really enjoying what I've been reading of Ben Reilly so far, and I'm excited to see JM's return to Marvel as well. We have Joker War coming out this Friday on Archives, which I believe I'll be leading. I'll be joined with Stefan, as always, and Michael for Comics. So that's Comics Kings right there. Also, we got a weekly wrap with myself and Bryce every Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. So we're getting a posting schedule. If you guys ever need to check that, just make sure you check my Instagram. I'm always dropping it. But weekly wrap up every Monday, 8 Eastern, with Christ and Infinite Rants every Wednesday, 1 o'clock. Archives every Friday, 1 o'clock. And then Creators Corners whenever it's scheduled. So that's something that you really got to pay attention to. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Again, I want to know who your favorite X-Men artist is. Take care, you guys. Have a good one.
Station.